Delaware. So we're just glad to have you here. We meet quarterly. We would encourage people, if you're not a member, to join us and really become part of this solution, which we know is achievable. So thanks for your time, and let's get moving here. We'll just get started right away. I'm going to turn things over, I think, to Erin or Rachel at this point, or Felicia.
Erin's gonna start us off
Excellent.
with continuum of care business. I'll just add, if you're not speaking, if you could please make sure to keep yourself muted. That would be great. We will be having breakout sessions and breakout rooms at the end where we hope you will speak and engage a lot with other folks that are here today. But please stay muted if you're not speaking. Thank you.
Okay, guys, to start us off with CoC business today, the first update we wanted to give was on CoC governance. The governance committee has been meeting since, I believe, May, all throughout June and July, to work on the CoC charter and the lead agency MOUs. So we had a great group. We had Carrie, the board chair, John, our vice chair, Marlena Gibson, John Whitelaw, and Susan Kent, along with our HAD staff and some DMA staff, which are our CoC consultants. We did an in-depth review of the charter and the MOUs and drafted comprehensive changes that will be recommended to the full board and the full voting membership. For a timeline, the governance subcommittee drafts will be presented and reviewed by the full board on August 5th, so coming up very soon. And then if there's any changes or anything like that, after that is reconciled, the board will vote to send the full drafts for vote and adoption at the CoC annual meeting, which is going to be on October 21st. So we just want to thank everybody who was involved in that process. The CoC charter is very important for how the entire CoC is governed, along with the MOUs. So it might not seem that important, but it really, really is. And we're really excited to present those changes and everything to everyone. The next thing we have for business is a call for a CoC board chair. Unfortunately, this is Carrie's last year as our board chair. She will remain on the board, but after 6 years and lots of great work, she is stepping down, and we are calling for any nominations for a new board chair. So here we have listed the responsibilities and requirements of the board chair. You can access this on our website on the CoC page. You can also see it in the materials that we will send out afterwards, after the meeting. So if you or anyone you know might be interested in chairing the CoC board, please send all inquiries to Carrie and to Rachel. Carrie, I don't know if you want to add anything else here
Sure.
about the board chair.
Right. Well, thank you, Erin. And I really, I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for the for really great time, really good opportunity for someone to think about doing this. It is a wonderful, life-changing, excellent experience, and I will, if you want me to be, I will be there to help you every step of the way as someone that could, support you and be there for the person that might be interested in doing this. It is a lot, to be honest, it is work, work obviously, but it's very fulfilling, wonderful work, working with a very active board, very active membership, and really learning and growing and becoming, I think of myself now as really, truly becoming a rogue advocate for those experiencing homelessness. And I feel like I've done that because I've learned so much from being and absorbing from every one of you all that is part of the CoC. So it's not like you're put out there and you wouldn't be getting support. I'm here to help. Other people are, obviously the board, very active, vice chair is very active. John, who's just been my wonderful colleague in all of this. So I really want to put it out there to folks to reach out to me, even if they, well, maybe have questions, want to talk about it. I'm here because I think it's a really great opportunity to not to say, to get some really good new folks involved in leading this organization and the wonderful things that it does. And I'm here for you if you have questions, comments, want to talk to me about it. I'm making myself available, and I will also help you in your transition if someone's interested in doing this. So that's what I would say. And it's really been a joy of my life. No need to thank me. I've absolutely loved being the chair. So thank you.
Well, Carrie, I will disagree slightly. I think you deserve a lot of thanks. And if the chat is any consolation, there's lots of people in the chat who thank you and are really grateful for all of your work too. All right. Next, we have CoC funding. So the fiscal year 21 notice of funding availability has not been released yet, but HUD has said that it will be. So this year we will be having a competitive CoC funding competition. And they've also indicated that there will be new money available this year, which is very exciting. Last year there was an auto renewal process due to COVID-19, so there was not a lot of opportunity to bring any new projects into the system. And this year we will have that opportunity, so that's very exciting. Just some timeline reminders for all renewal applicants. The submission deadline is July 30th, 2021 at 4:00 p.m. So please make sure that you get everything in by then. And anybody who has any questions or needs any assistance, please let me know as soon as possible. We want to make sure that those applications are strong coming in. And any materials that need to be looked at, or if anybody's interested in what CoC funding materials look like, you can find them on our funding page, which is linked there. Tentatively, we have a new project timeline that's dependent on the NOFA release. So this is subject to change, but right now we are slating for the week of August 9th to be releasing our new project RFP, a new project information meeting. We will be releasing that statewide. So if anybody knows any providers or anyone who would be interested in coming in as a new project to the CoC, please let us know as soon as possible. We really like to start having those conversations with everyone now. And it's a great opportunity to diversify the pool of homeless services that are in Delaware. And then the week of August 27th is when we have slated for the new project application submission deadline. So right now we're looking at about 3 weeks for that process. But again, this could be subject to change dependent on the NOFA release. So more information will be coming out about that again. So it's not the first time you'll hear about new project stuff, and a lot more will be coming. And finally, for me, I just have a 2021 point in time count and housing inventory count overview. So we have our report released for the fiscal year, the 2021 point in time count. One of the most staggering statistics that we got this year was that there was a 35% increase in homelessness, even though the unsheltered count was not conducted. So there's been quite a buzz around this. I'm not sure if anybody's seen several of the newscasts or articles, but 35% is quite an increase. So we definitely want to keep that in mind, especially around coming into the competition for people coming in for funding. 35% is a lot. For households in particular, the number of households with children experiencing homelessness increased by 87%, which was also another large jump. Almost all of the new households coming into homelessness this year were households with children, which again is another staggering and very humbling statistic. So there's a lot of families with children that were struggling through the pit count this year. some positive light to that is that the number of beds available for households with children increased substantially from 2020 to 2021. So this would be a lot of the rapid rehousing funding that came in through the CARES money and things like that. So there is a lot of resources being funneled to the state to help with children's and families and children. So the number of rapid rehousing beds increased by over 100 beds from 2020 to 2021. So that is positive. Here you can just see some trends in the bed availability. So the number of beds or projects dedicated to serving clients experiencing homelessness. You can see from 2020 to 2021 that the permanent supportive housing stock and the emergency shelter bed stock has decreased, but you can see that trend upward in the rapid rehousing beds. So this is just kind of shows us a little bit of maybe some gaps in the system where we need some more resources. And just some additional reports that were released around this year. You can access the full PIT and HIC report, which goes into much more detail analysis around the 2021 PIT and HIC numbers. We do have our system performance report, our housing and homelessness in Delaware report that Sarah Ryan, our policy director, put together. It's a fantastic report if you haven't already looked at it. Some rapid rehousing data and racial disparities and equity data, along also with our centralized intake dashboard reports. And this gives some really great information about the calls and referrals and situations coming through centralized intake. So all of them are linked here, but they're all also available on our website. And with that, I will pass it off to Rachel to do our shelter policy updates.
Thanks, Erin. So it can be a little bit hard to talk about these things without totally knowing who's in the room. I know we have some emergency shelter providers here with us today. I know we have some folks who work for state government here today. I know we have some elected officials with us today, some folks who work with domestic violence survivors. So we also have a local HUD representative with us today. So some of you may know these things, some of you may not. I'm gonna talk as though no one knows anything to make sure that everyone understands what we're talking about here. So we, through this past year and a half now, about almost, I don't know, time's been odd, right? Have found ourselves as a community, whether you're someone managing a shelter or not, regardless of where you sit and how you touch homelessness, have all found ourselves in a really challenging place. And one of the things that's been extremely challenging for people experiencing homelessness is the ability to access and get their basic needs met during this crisis. So there's been a lot of change that's happened throughout the year to try to better accommodate people experiencing homelessness in safe ways due to COVID-19. Primarily, as many, I believe all of you know, many folks, especially families with children, have been sheltered temporarily, both in congregate settings, but capacity there has tended to be lower due to the need to implement COVID safety protocols, which is a good thing. And a lot of folks have been sheltered in hotel and motel settings, which are safer to in terms of keeping people safe from the spread of the virus. We are now at a place where the governor has lifted the emergency order here in Delaware. A number of our congregate emergency shelter providers have started to open up some additional beds and spaces. And our DHSS and the state service centers have been sheltering some folks for a really long time in hotels and motels and are working to try to transition folks out of those settings into other places. So we're at kind of a critical juncture as a community in terms of trying to make sure that folks aren't left without access to safe shelter and that we can reconfigure our crisis response system, our emergency shelter system, our homeless prevention system. So when we think about keeping people in their homes, the eviction moratorium federally is going to be up soon. And in Delaware, there are no longer protections in place for folks facing eviction in ways that there were even a few weeks ago. So we're at a very critical juncture. I say all of that just to raise awareness of the issue. We are at a place where we are seeing people becoming homeless and not able to leave homelessness as quickly as they used to be able to, being kind of stuck there. The rental housing market is really tight. Rents in some of the lowest income units are increasing significantly. People are having a hard time leaving homelessness and accessing rental units because of that tightness of the rental market. And potentially we have the potential to see more people becoming homeless as more evictions may start to occur and be processed through our court system. We are hoping we don't see that, but if those things continue to happen at the same time, our response to homelessness can't possibly absorb, our community's resources can't possibly absorb that level of need. I say all of that just to raise awareness. It's something that we're thinking a lot about. I'll get off my soapbox and talk a little bit about what I was asked to talk about, which is some changes that have been happening just in our emergency shelter congregate capacity world and changes at centralized intake. So there were a number of months where we were talking with folks about the need for a negative COVID test prior to shelter entry. There were a number of emergency shelters that had been requiring that as part of their COVID safety protocol. And there still are a number of shelters that are requiring folks to evidence negative COVID test prior to entering a congregate shelter setting. At centralized intake, we are no longer asking folks to say that they are able to produce that prior to sending a referral to shelter. Folks are now being sent to shelter that they're eligible for, and our shelters are working to help people connect with a rapid testing site or a testing site local to the person or the shelter. We have seen on our end at Housing Alliance, as the organization that implements centralized intake on behalf of the continuum of care, that has made it a lot easier for us to send referrals to open shelter beds. I hope that folks in the community are seeing a difference. It's only been a few weeks since that change was put into place, but please reach out if you have any questions about that. And then the next slide, I will just, again, you're going to have access to all these slides so you can look at this in more detail if you are interested. But this is a list of the shelters that we at, most of them are ones that we at centralized intake refer to. And this chart just lists them by county, what type of COVID safety protocols are in place, and whether the shelters have been able to open to full capacity. In December, October, November, December, January, I think our January continuum of care meeting, we were at about 50% of our congregate emergency shelters available for use in the community. We're now up to 83%. So we have seen with the significant decrease in COVID risk in our community, the increase and uptake in vaccination since that time, that a lot of shelters have been able to safely reopen some of their beds, which is a really good thing to be able to accommodate more folks and meet that need. And of course, as I always say when I talk about this, every shelter is different. Some shelters are, were accommodating as many people as they possibly could pre-COVID without concern to crowding, and may not for quite some time get back to their full levels. Other shelters have, in terms of how their building is set up, have separate rooms for separate households or separate rooms for separate people. And that makes a huge difference in terms of how many beds places can safely reopen and maintain safety within CDC's expectations for congregate living settings, such as homeless shelters. So this is where we are right now. There is an update in the chat. It looks like something that I have here is incorrect. So thank you, Crystal from the Salvation Army, saying that apparently on my chart, it says the Salvation Army requires COVID test prior to entry, but Crystal saying that is no longer required. But they do questions and direct folks to get tested if needed. And Carol is asking, hi, Carol. Carol is asking where the Hope Center is in this mix. The Hope Center is not included here because it is not a place that receives referrals through centralized intake, and it's not a congregate shelter. It's a hotel motel, and folks access it differently. I can let Carrie speak to that a little bit more, but let me also say, thank you, Janine. Janine is also correcting me and updating me. Dover Interfaith Mission is fully open with 34 beds. So I will update that. Thank you so much, Janine and Crystal. I will make those updates here. Carrie, did you want to respond to the Hope Center?
Well, we are part of exactly what Rachel said. We're part of the motel voucher referral system. So our referrals come from the State Service Center. We do not require a COVID test or any of that for entry, but our access point is through the State Service Center. And we're at about, we could be at 100% capacity. Right now we're at about 75% capacity.
Thank you, Carrie. Open to answering any questions or receiving any additional feedback here. Please continue to communicate. We are so thankful. I can never talk about this without thanking folks for doing this work. So thank you to those of you who are helping people stay safe and have been doing so during really, potentially dangerous times. And we're really looking forward to continuing to work with all of you and our partners at the state to keep folks safe as we hope to try to avoid a major increase in homelessness. And I'll leave it there. There will be conversations about policy coming forward. So thank you.
All right, Felicia, do you want to go ahead and introduce Jim?
All right, so next we have Jim Bianchetta. He's going to be speaking on the Delaware LGBTQ Housing Safeguard Committee.
Thank you, Felicia, and thank you to the HID and CoC for inviting me to come here and give you an update of our committee's activities. I am the president of PFLAG in Northern Delaware. For those of you who may not know PFLAG, we call ourselves the extended family of the LGBTQ community. So our membership is mostly moms and dads and allies of LGBTQ people, but about a third of our membership are also people who identify as LGBTQ. We provide education, support, and advocacy for that community, support mainly through our monthly support group meetings. If anybody's interested in that, you can find information about our support group meetings at our website. Just Google PFLAG Wilmington, Delaware, and you'll find us. So how did this group get started? So back in the day, when people actually could get together over a cup of coffee or a beer or a glass of wine, a group of us were together saying, what could we do to provide some additional support over and above what we do to the LGBT community, and recognizing that, well, it depends on what study you look at, but somewhere between 20 and 40% of people experiencing homelessness are LGBTQ. So we said, let's start a shelter. And so we started recruiting interested parties. I'll show you a list of who's been actively involved in our committee in a little while. And then early in 20, we came to the realization that we are probably not the right group to build and operate shelters. There are other people who are experts at that, who know how to do that, and that we shifted our focus then to providing support to those people who know how to do this sort of work far better than we could. And so, so we started a partnership arrangement with Weston Neighborhood House. If I can see the next slide, Felicia. Actually, yeah, let me back up to the vision for our committee. It's to see that LGBTQ youth in Delaware live in environments that support their sexual orientation and or their gender identity, and expression. And so that is inclusive of people who are actually experiencing homelessness or people who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. Next slide, Felicia. So how do we get to that vision? One is through establishing relationships. Most of us were not familiar at all with the Delaware infrastructure for helping people who are experiencing homelessness. So establishing relationships with people who do that sort of thing was kind of a new thing for us. Also, I mentioned we're doing fundraising, training and support, and then of course advocacy wherever that might be needed. Next slide, Felicia. So included in our committee, or active members in our committee there so far, PFLAG, as I mentioned. PTK is the Parents of Trans Kids. This is a group that came together 4 or 5 years ago for parents who have learned that they have a transgender or non-binary family member and would be needing support. West End Neighborhood House is the transitional housing operator that we have partnered with and are doing the fundraising for. Christiana Care, AIDS Delaware, Orgullo Delaware is a group that supports the Hispanic community in our area. Her Story and Ensemble, Camp Rehoboth, Child Inc., and then there's a raft of other individuals who just have a passion for this subject and are also interested in helping us with this. Next slide, Felicia. So I mentioned our current initiatives include fundraising and support for West End Neighborhood Houses, Lifelines 3 youth programming project. They are, as we speak, putting the finishing touches on a 3-bedroom townhome in the Little Lily section of Wilmington, which they will prioritize for LGBTQ youth, as well as they're also opening up a drop-in center that will be providing support and services for for anybody, not just the LGBTQ folks, but anyone else. Just a couple of weeks ago, we brought in Carla Fleshman to do a microaggression training session for the CoC. And so I think there were 40 or 50 people who attended that session, and Carla did a great job of providing over basically an hour and a half, about a day's worth of training around how people who are in the business of operating shelters and providing support to people experiencing homelessness can more respectfully welcome the LGBTQ community into their services. Third areas, we're working on a survey to determine in Delaware not only the folks who are LGBT, who identify as LGBTQ, and also have at some point in time in their life experienced homelessness or are at risk of homelessness. Next slide, Felicia. And so aside from our ongoing fundraising efforts and the survey work, our near-term goal is to work with at least one shelter in each of the 3 Delaware counties to form a sort of partnership that would where they would provide a firm commitment to gracefully accept LGBTQ folks, and then we would provide training, consultation, other support if there are people who got thrown out of their house because they came out to their parents as trans or LGBTQ and got thrown out of their house. You know, we would be available to provide support to that family to help them understand what their youngster is going through, as well as some overall training as well. So I think that is about it, unless there are questions. So here's my contact information for anybody who wants to reach out to me directly. You're welcome to do that. I'll be happy to hear from you. And let me see if there are any issues in, I'm not seeing anything in the chat that. So let me just open it up. If anybody has any questions about what we're doing or how we're going about doing it, fire away.
All right. So it doesn't look like we have any questions for Jim. Again, his contact information is listed. So please contact him directly if you have any questions or would like to get involved. And you can also contact us directly and we can put you in contact with Jim as well. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And thank you for being here with us today to present.
Thanks for having me.
Aaron, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
From the YW. We recently had a family that has moved into the program that is a trans family. Do you know if the shelter, they're fine here, I don't have a problem. I'm just trying to figure out resources for them in general. For the family, do you know if the shelter that is being set up, are they going to house families or is it just going to be individuals?
Individuals.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. Thank you.
And Jim, I don't mean to, but I'm gonna anyway, I guess, offer your support to the YW. That's not frequent or common. So Klaisha, Jim's really easy to talk to and really helpful. So you should feel free to reach out if he might have any thoughts about how to best accommodate and serve those households. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Thank you.
And Jim, it looks like we do actually have some questions rolling in the chat now. So Matt from YW asks if this has been a way to activate participants in your support groups as like community volunteers through this committee.
We're open to doing anything that supports our vision, which is to make sure that LGBTQ people are living in respected and safe environments. So if that's something that fits our what our group is about, absolutely.
Okay, and we have one more. Will the shelter be primarily youth individuals or just LGBTQ individuals in general?
Yes, it'll be 18 to 25 years old, I believe.
Okay, so primarily youth.
Primarily youth, yes.
All right. And then we just have one additional comment in the chat from Cindy. She says, any LGBTQ family should be eligible for any affordable housing in the state. So I believe that would be for you, Klaisha. Do we have any additional questions for Jim?
I just wanted to say that we are really excited. I put it in the chat. This is Stacy. We're really excited to be working with Jim and his team and with PTK, and all the support that they have provided thus far has been phenomenal. The amount of time that they and we all spend and have spent in meetings and discussions and back and forth has been like top notch. So we're really excited to continue to work with them and make sure that we're all clear too that the programming that we are talking about in regards to West End specifically is not a shelter. That's housing, transitional housing. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. And we do just have another shout out in the chat for Jim. Deborah says that you were directly involved in keeping an LGBTQ individual housed who is also living with a neurological condition. So I just wanted to give you a huge thanks for that too. It sounds like you're really involved in the work and we just need more people like you in the community.
Labor of love.
Thank you so much. All right. So next we have our emergency housing voucher update, and that will be Devin Manning from DSHA.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Devin Manning with Delaware State Housing Authority. I'm going to be giving some updates on the emergency housing voucher program. I know some of you have heard this information already, so I'll ask you to just bear with me. I'll try to keep it fresh and lively for you. But basically, through the American Rescue Plan Act, HUD is making available 70,000 emergency housing vouchers. And these are federal housing vouchers restricted for use by certain target populations. And those include individuals and families who are homeless, who are at risk of homelessness, who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, and who were recently homeless, but due to their financial situation, their economic situation, they have a high risk of housing instability and a high likelihood of becoming homeless again. So next slide, please. The specific allocations within Delaware were awarded to 3 of Delaware's 5 public housing authorities. Wilmington Housing Authority has received 43. Those can be used within the city of Wilmington alone. Newcastle County Housing Authority has received 39. Those can be used in the balance of Newcastle County outside of the city of Wilmington. And Delaware State Housing Authority has received 38. And our jurisdiction is in Kent and Sussex counties. So we have a statewide total of 120 emergency housing vouchers. If you'd like more information about how HUD made these determinations, you can refer to the public notice. I put the link in the slide there. So they took into account population size, but they also factored in homelessness statistics and other sort of demographic and population data. But they do have a very detailed explanation for how these allocations were actually arrived at. So next slide, please. So these are general federal housing vouchers, housing choice vouchers, commonly known as Section 8 vouchers. So a lot of the same rules will apply to EHVs, but they also have some very specific requirements that are unique to this program. So typically, public housing authorities would award housing choice vouchers to people who are applying through their overall waiting list for housing choice vouchers and or public housing. For this program, we actually are required to accept referrals through the continuum of care, through the coordinated entry system, which in Delaware, of course, is called centralized intake, or for the population of folks who are fleeing domestic violence, we can accept referrals directly from victim service providers who are working directly to assist that population. We also have to execute a memorandum of understanding with the CoC and with VSPs if they'll be involved in the referral process. This is sort of a boilerplate document that contains all of the requirements that HUD has laid out in the public notice, and also sort of delves in some of the specifics about the actual referral process and the partnership amongst the agencies. That is due to HUD by July 31st. And we also have to provide supportive services to EHV households. This is not something that is typically required for general housing choice voucher program participants. So next slide, please. So these are some of the supportive services that are required for these households. And the nice thing about it is HUD has actually made funding available to support these services. So every EHV household will be entitled to receive up to $3,500 in assistance with housing search assistance, security deposits, utility arrears, landlord recruitment and retention practices, moving expenses, tenant readiness services, essential household items, renter's insurance, just general sort of tenancy supports to help people transition into these units in the community. And for those of you who are rapid rehousing providers, these are many of the same services that you already provide to the folks that you are working with, the households that you're working with. So I think you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Felicia. What we decided to do in Delaware, a couple of things. So again, first, it's 3 public housing authorities that received allocations of EHVs, but Delaware is a small state and it's only 120 vouchers. And we also have 1 CoC statewide. So very early on, we decided that it might make sense for us to approach this in a coordinated statewide way so that households who are being referred to this program would be treated consistently, regardless of where they live, where they want to live, to what public housing authority they're being referred. And we would all partner with the CoC and sign on to one memorandum of understanding and package that up and send it off to HUD. We also decided that since the services that are required for EHV households are so similar to rapid rehousing, and since the PHAs themselves are not really in a position to be able to provide those services directly to households, that we would try to partner with rapid rehousing providers to serve households that are being referred through the CoC. And working with HUD and as the CoC lead agency, we kind of just drilled down because, you know, that's a huge population, right, of folks who are eligible for rapid rehousing assistance. And so to the other thing I should mention, sorry, I'm interrupting myself here, but HUD has very sort of high expectations for timeline on this. They really want vouchers to be put into the hands of households very quickly, and they want those households to lease up quickly. So there is strong encouragement from HUD to expedite the lease-up process as much as we possibly can by coordinating with partnering entities. So all that being said, the decision has been made to prioritize for the CoC referral process families and individuals who are literally homeless and referred to rapid rehousing through centralized intake, or families and individuals who are already enrolled in rapid rehousing, but they don't have the ability to sort of maintain housing longer term because rapid rehousing, of course, is time limited. So if they don't have sufficient income or assets to be able to sustain their housing and they're at high risk of becoming homeless once their rapid rehousing assistance ends, those folks would also be eligible for a referral for an emergency housing voucher, which would be a more permanent form of housing assistance. Some additional criteria within that second population: they must have been enrolled in rapid rehousing for at least 3 months. They must already have a landlord identified who is willing to accept the emergency housing voucher, again, to expedite the lease-up process as much as we possibly can. They must be severely cost burdened if rapid rehousing assistance were to end. I believe severely cost burdened is paying more than 50% of your income towards the rent. They must have been unable to move into housing on their own due to their inability to increase income as over the period of time that they have been receiving rapid rehousing assistance. So next slide, please. Outside of the CoC, the victim service providers, People's Place and Child Inc. will be referring a smaller number of applicants directly to the program. These are folks that would not be coming through centralized intake. They would be coming directly from the victim service providers. And these, again, are households who are fleeing, attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. And again, not coming through centralized intake, but coming straight from these VSPs. They have floated the idea of giving priority to individuals or households who are currently living in their domestic violence shelters. I'm not sure if that's 100% finalized yet. We're still kind of ironing out the fine details of our referral processes. And we haven't also decided on a set number of vouchers for this population either. I believe it was proposed 5 vouchers per VSP, I think was what was proposed. But again, that has not been finalized. We're still trying to work through those details. So next slide, please. So, and we recognize that you are all stretched to the limit, all of our provider partners who do such amazing work assisting homeless individuals and families. So some additional support would probably be necessary in order to effectively implement services for EHV households. So in addition to the $3,500 that is available for direct client assistance through HUD, through the EHV program, DSHA, because we have access to the Emergency Rental Assistance Program funds that are also through ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, we are proposing to make available up to $1,500 in additional direct client assistance. Again, for those of you who are rapid rehousing providers, you know it's pretty standard to have a maximum direct client assistance amount of $5,000. So up to $5,000. So this would make EHV comparable to our other existing rapid rehousing programs. And we are also proposing to make provider support available to the rapid rehousing agencies that would be assisting households work their way through this program. And again, Details are not finalized just yet. There's some concerns about accessing multiple federal sources to, I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but suffice it to say, we are committed to making provider support available. We just need to figure out the best way to structure it so that agencies can take advantage of those funds to support their staff time, the work that they're putting into the program, the assistance that they are providing to these households, but in a way that's not going to get anybody in trouble with their auditing requirements or anything like that. So plans are still very much in development for this provider support aspect, but we are committed to making it available. So next slide. Next up, so again, I mentioned the memorandum of understanding is due to HUD by July 31st. That has been finalized. It has been reviewed by all partners, and we are just collecting signatory pages right now. So that should be ready to package up to HUD, hopefully by next week, early next week. Again, referral processes still need a little bit of tweaking and refining. Some program documents will probably have to be drafted, particularly for that second population on the CoC side, the folks that are already engaged with a rapid rehousing provider. And the rapid rehousing provider is the one sort of identifying that family or that individual and saying, hey, I really think that rapid rehousing is not going to sustain them longer term. I think they would be a good candidate for this program. So we'll have to draft some sort of referral process for them to be sort of sent back through centralized intake in order to access an emergency housing voucher. Again, ensuring provider engagement. We have had several conversations with the rapid rehousing providers, with the victim service providers. So just making sure that they are willing and ready and able to do this and to participate. We'll have to execute grant agreements that specify the terms of their support, their participation in the emergency housing voucher program. And we hope, fingers crossed, that we can start accepting referrals in August or September. Again, HUD is very interested in getting these used quickly. So we have to have our MOU signed and ready to go by July 31st. The funding should have been wired to us by that time. Like we should already have been in receipt of the EHV funding. So we should be ready to sort of flip the switch and open up the floodgates once those provider grant agreements are in place. And we're assured that EHV households will be able to receive the assistance that they need in order to effectively navigate the rental market and move into units with these EHVs. So next slide, I think that might be it. So there's my contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so we do have a question from Representative Bombach in the chat. He wanted to know whether the Newcastle County or DSHA vouchers can cross the line and offer EHVs into Newark and Dover, since the local housing authorities did not qualify.
So the Newcastle County vouchers would be able to be used in Newark, and the DSHA vouchers would be able to be used within the city of Dover.
Okay, we have another question from Brad Shannon. He says, available housing is currently very limited. Are there concerns about requiring a landlord to be identified and hold a unit open before starting the paperwork with the participant?
I think that's kind of the reason why we would like to, folks to have a landlord already identified, is because we do acknowledge that, there is a shortage in housing inventory. The folks that have already been placed in housing through rapid rehousing services are already living in rental units out in the community. So it's, basically having a conversation with that landlord to determine if they're willing to accept the voucher, and also making sure that the family meets the other eligibility criteria requirements as spelled out, on that previous slide. If you want to actually go back to that slide, Felicia, that might be helpful just to provide some context for what I'm trying to describe. But it's the CoC referral process. So there you go. So kind of by zooming in on folks who are already placed in housing units and just making sure the landlord is amenable to accepting the voucher should help to expedite at least the use of these vouchers. They would, of course, have to meet the inspection requirements from the PHA, which is housing quality standards. So that's part of the conversation or the discussion with the landlord, I think, is making sure that they're comfortable with that and that they feel like they can meet that requirement in order for the voucher to be used in the unit.
Okay, from Matt at YWCA, he said, just confirming it's to be determined how providers will access this client and provider support? Will the CoC or DSHA announce an application if there is one, or let us know how providers can accept the additional funding for individual cases through CI? So how are they, like, the process to access the support is still being determined, right?
Yes, yeah. So there's, I think what the CoC, on the CoC side, what they'll probably do is come up, I think, with like a one-page application to basically, verify that the household meets the eligibility criteria at the bottom of this slide. And then that would be sent back through centralized intake to access an EHV. Rachel, please jump in here if I'm misstating this, but I think the plan is for any new referral coming through centralized intake to access rapid rehousing would automatically sort of be paired with an emergency housing voucher. Is that right?
Yeah, so the idea is that any new referral would come with also a referral to a housing voucher, and that there would be a really simple way for like literally like a one-page thing for a rapid rehouser to say, hey, we've got this household, we think they need an EHV because they meet this for like pretty basic criteria, send it in and then get that referral to the PHA for the housing voucher. Of course, there is paperwork and processes involved with getting that housing voucher issued to the household with the Public Housing Authority. But our goal is to make it as the process that involves us as efficient and less cumbersome as possible.
From Terry Williams, it says, is there assistance for those that are rapid rehousing qualified but have outstanding judgments due to COVID?
Outstanding judgments due to COVID. I wonder, I mean, the sort of standard, again, rapid rehousing type assistance with arrears, rental arrears would come into play, but I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit on the specificity behind the due to COVID.
And this isn't an answer to that. So Jen Parsons in the chat is saying that rapid rehousing can pay for past rental judgments. In terms of arrears, if it's utility arrears, rapid rehousers can apply through us for some utility arrears assistance for quite big chunks of money to expedite the process. Folks can apply. We have an arrears assistance program that was CARES funded, so rapid rehousers can send applications to us. Lisa at Centralized Intake can provide, has provided all that to our rapid rehousers. Folks can come in to pay out Delmarva, water bills, anything preventing a landlord from leasing up to the household. Obviously if they can't get electric in their name, et cetera. So there should be some financial assistance in place in a variety of places. Hopefully that will not be a barrier for these households.
And if folks are struggling to pay their rent because due to COVID, then of course they can access the Delaware Housing Assistance Program. I don't think that DHAP is currently structured to pay for past judgments specifically, but it is a flexible funding source, and we're sort of, refining and evolving the program almost daily, it feels like. So, but if folks cannot pay their rent currently because due to COVID specifically, then they can always access DHAP to support that.
From Deborah, we have, what more do you think we can do or what's being done to have more landlords accept vouchers and other income sources?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? So if you want to go back a couple slides, Felicia, to the sort of services that are allowable, because part of that is landlord, thank you. Part of that is landlord recruitment and retention. So it could be as simple as sort of like a security deposit, or more complicated, establishing a risk mitigation fund. That's something that we've tried to support through the Home for Good program for several years, and it's never really come to fruition. But just that sort of safety net for a landlord to be more amenable to renting to a hard to house population if they know that there is a fund available they can access if there's damage to the unit, if they vacate the unit without warning. Other incentives, of course, source of income legislation was debated just recently. And so if advocates can support similar type pieces of legislation in the future, that's always welcome. Senator Coons also has a package at the federal level that I need to follow up on and just see what's happening with it. But Kelsey from his office presented recently on some sort of complementary landlord supports that they are developing just to make the voucher program, this voucher program and all voucher programs more attractive to engage landlord participation. So there are things underway, and I'm happy to make resources available for things that are currently happening, and then for proposed activities that have not yet come to fruition, but we would very much like to see them here in Delaware.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Devin. For the sake of time, we are going to move on to the American Rescue Plan funding for Delaware. These slides will be available with Devin's information, or anyone is more than welcome to contact us directly, and we can connect you with Devin as well. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and allow Sarah to share hers, and you can take it away, Sarah.
Thanks. Let me just start the slideshow. All right, so I'm Sarah Ryan. I'm the policy director at Housing Alliance Delaware. Like Rachel said, there are a lot of folks in the room, a lot of folks that know a lot. So I'm really happy to be doing this presentation. I'm hoping that other folks will chime in where I get things wrong or miss something. I would love to hear from you. I'm going to do a kind of really just high level overview of the American Rescue Plan Act, because that's what we have right now. So just to highlight that this was a $1.9 trillion act. It's kind of pot 3 of COVID relief money, one of the big 3 pots. One of the big things that it does generally is that it provides the guaranteed monthly income for families through the child tax credit. And even though that's not housing specific, I'm going to talk about a couple things that aren't housing specific. I think that's huge. Folks should be getting those payments as of July. So I'm hoping that we see our clients with those increased payments monthly, and that allows for some additional resources for them as they're seeking and maintaining housing. The Act also, of course, does a lot of other things around education and healthcare, which are also incredibly important, but I'm not going to talk about right now. So as we know, there's a direct federal allocation directed towards housing and homelessness in this Act, specific $5 billion to assist people who are living in experiencing homelessness, and $21 billion for the emergency rental assistance program. I'm going to spend a lot of time on that, but first I want to talk about the total allocation of funding to Delaware. So we know that $1.4 billion is going to go to Delaware total, that a hunk of that is going to go to the state, and then a bunch is going to go to small municipalities. And let's see if I can do this smoothly. Nothing is ever smooth on Zoom. So the link that I put in my presentation is a link to the state treasurer's website, where they now show the exact amount of funds that go to each jurisdiction and whether the payment has been processed by the jurisdiction. So this is really important for folks who are looking at their local municipalities to see how much American Rescue Plan Act dollars are going specifically to your town, city, county, local municipality. You can see that here. What we know is that the American Rescue Plan Act dollars going to local municipalities are really, really important, right? So they are not targeted towards housing and homelessness, but they can be. And this is where we have a lot of room for advocacy, right? So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about how we can make sure that these dollars are targeted towards housing and homelessness. It is not a small amount of money. If you go into that treasurer link and look, even the smallest municipalities are getting many, many times their normal annual budget in this one allocation. And so the places where we live, our local places, can have a really big impact potentially on housing and homelessness at a local level. And that's really exciting and really huge, and also really overwhelming when we think about all the tiny little buckets of money that are going everywhere. One thing to say here is that I think that if you have questions about how to approach local municipalities or kind of what's going on with your local municipality, feel free to contact me after the meeting. I'm happy to have conversations with you and provide support on kind of that advocacy point. So one of the issues with local jurisdictions, and I think we have some local jurisdictions on this call that maybe can chime in on this even, but is that there's Treasury guidance that provides how this ARPA money can be used on the local level for housing and homelessness. And I put the exact language here because sometimes exact language is really cool and it gives us a lot of information, right? So they're saying that you can address homelessness, you can address affordable housing, and you can look at housing vouchers. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Previous slide. Okay, so the Treasury is going to look at how local municipalities spend their money, right? They have to report to Treasury. And this is where it gets sticky. And I'm going to spend just a minute on this because, again, I think this is a huge point of advocacy. What the Treasury guidance says about spending money on affordable housing and homelessness at the local level is that it either has to be spent in a qualified census tract, or it has to be spent in a geographic area that was, and I'm kind of generalizing a little bit, but that was impacted by COVID, that you can show either a health or economic impact. This makes local jurisdictions a little nervous, right? Because if you're not in a qualified census tract, then you have to show something, right? And it's very general language. I would say, as an advocate, that's great, right? We can look at local neighborhoods, we can look at zip codes, we can look at geographic areas and say, look, this area was impacted by COVID, we know by the COVID numbers. Or look, this area was impacted economically, we know by unemployment numbers. Or just look at this area, we can see that there's economic impact. Look, just look, right? But it's hard to have that kind of general guidance. So there is expectation that the Treasury might add some more specific language, but we haven't seen that yet. But what I would say is that there are a lot of areas of our state that don't have qualified census tracts that could be spending this money on housing, affordable housing, and homelessness that might be scared to. So I think we need to show up and say, you can do it. It's really not that hard. We'll help you show that these areas were impacted either economically or had a health impact from COVID. And we think that you can spend this money, and we'll think about really creative ways that you can develop affordable housing, or that you can provide homeless services, or that you can provide housing navigation services, or that you can do something really great and creative with your local money, right, Frederica? You really can do something with this money, right? I'm just picking on Frederica, but like, very local, small jurisdictions could be doing something cool. Okay, I'm going to get off my high horse there, but feel free to contact me afterwards if you have questions about that type of advocacy. Okay, emergency rental assistance. We have lots of folks from DSHA on the line, but I'm going to go over it quickly anyway. So there's a $21 billion allocated federally. Delaware is getting $152 million. This is part of the American Rescue Plan Act. This is in addition to the $200 million that we got for rental assistance through the COVID Relief Act that was passed in December. So that's a total of $352 million. That's a lot of money for rental assistance. We applaud DSHA for putting together a DHAP program that's going to pump that money out into our communities. Again, this money, just like previous iterations of DHAP, is going to go to paying for rental assistance, so paying directly for rental arrears or for 15 months of rent forward. It also can pay for utility assistance. This pot of money and DSHA can probably chime in on this too, is not yet being used, right? So first we have to make it through the COVID Relief Act money, then we'll get to this money. This money has a different expiration date. It's currently 2025. So we hope to have rental assistance in our kind of pipeline for some time from the ARPA funds. Housing vouchers, Devin already did a great job going over this. I don't need to rehash this. She did fabulous. What I do want to say here that Devin didn't say, because maybe I'm a little bit too optimistic, but I saw Rachel put it in the chat. This is so exciting. This is the first time that we've gotten a new allocation of vouchers from the federal level. This is huge. Yes, it's only 120 vouchers, but maybe this is the tip of the iceberg. The Biden administration is still making noise about potentially trying to do vouchers as an entitlement. So in other words, if you qualify for a voucher, you would get one. That is just way too huge, right? That would change the entire game. When Deborah asked the question about what would make landlords accept vouchers, well, if everyone had one, that might be a new way to help landlords accept vouchers. If everyone had one, we would have a really different way of looking at our systems. And so if we can get vouchers as an entitlement, if we can continue to see new infusions of vouchers from the federal level, I think that we're gonna see some shifting in the way that our, hopefully, right? I'm an optimist, in the way that our state kind of reacts to folks using rental assistance. Homeless assistance, everyone on this call is probably intimately familiar with this part of the American Rescue Plan Act. $5 billion federally. We got a large amount of home supplemental allocations. I put those here, Wilmington, Newcastle, and then non-entitlement would be like the entire state. Here, I also put some specific language because I think, again, this is really important. So these funds, again, can be used for tenant-based rental assistance. My sense now in Delaware, and maybe again someone else might want to chime in on this, is that it's unlikely it would be used this way because we are a small state with a pretty big rental assistance allocation right now through DHAP. It is more likely that it would go to support affordable housing or support other homeless prevention and housing counseling and other services. Again, it's a really, really big amount of money that is exciting to us. And it's something that can really change kind of the way our systems are working. And I can't say exciting enough. I get really excited. Other housing assistance that's coming through the American Rescue Plan Act. We have some homeowner assistance coming. There's some fair housing money. It's not a lot of money, but it's still exciting that they're thinking about fair housing when they're thinking about how to help us recover from the pandemic. I think that everyone on this call, I want to, again, take kind of a moment to talk about advocacy. The fair housing piece of all this looms large. Right, because when folks are discriminated against for their source of income, when they're discriminated against for any other reason, that is a problem. It's also, we are hearing more and more because of the tight rental market, a really big issue for current renters who are facing discrimination or other unfair practices from current landlords that are because they're in a vulnerable position. So I think the fair housing is huge. And then utility assistance, again, that can come from through DHAP for specific utility bills. This is more kind of an infrastructure type piece. The hope would be that we could get some of this assistance. I've been talking to folks in Sussex County about the unincorporated pieces of that county and whether or not we can try and get some more drinking and wastewater assistance for folks living in those portions of Sussex. So there's other exciting things. Exciting is my word of the day. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all your lovely faces, and I have not been monitoring chat, so I will look at that as well.
Sarah, there was
Yes.
a question about what is the statewide total for homeless assistance? It was missed. I know you had a slide up about what was the statewide Delaware's total in ARPA funds for housing and homeless assistance.
Yes. Let me pull up my PowerPoint again. I don't know that number off the top of my head. Is there another question while I do that?
Yes. Another question from Terry is, are there or will there be any vouchers allotted specifically for returning citizens that are homeless? I have not heard anything about vouchers specifically for that population from HUD, but anyone who knows anything different, please correct me if I'm wrong here. Sarah, do you know?
I don't know. I think if there's anyone from DSHA on the line, I think that that's a important piece that folks have been working on about returning citizens and how to make sure that they are able to access housing quickly. I don't think that American Rescue Plan addressed that at all. And Mimi, it would be about $11 million in homeless assistance.
And I would just say on top of, to answer the question about reentry, returning citizens, though we aren't seeing vouchers allocated specifically, the state is part of a family reentry pilot where all 5 housing authorities actually are working to let returning citizens come and live with a family member that's living in public housing or has a housing choice voucher. So that's a direct partnership with the Department of Corrections, and we're the first state in the country to do it. We followed the model of New York City and New Orleans. And so right now, this is working in public housing units, and we should be unveiling it with vouchers very soon. So it would allow returning citizens to become part of a family that's already in existing housing, public housing, because as of before that time, it wasn't allowed. So we're hoping that we can show some really good performance with that pilot program, but not directly related to Sarah's and ARPA, but something that we're doing as well. We started before COVID, actually.
I would chime in to say, I think the vouchers is only one very small, I don't want to say small, but small piece of the American Rescue Plan Act. For returning citizens, you absolutely could be advocating that the money for developing affordable housing or providing services or providing increased wraparound services for folks is used to target that specific population. Again, on both the local level and on the county level and on the state level and with the home funds, we all can be, thinking about how we want to target these funds. I also had a question on the chat about how do you know which municipality is yours? I'm happy to have a conversation offline. When I was talking about local municipalities, though, when I was looking at that list from the treasurer, I was talking more about the town that you live in. So if you live in Wilmington, it would be Wilmington. If you live in Dover, it would be Dover. If you live in a smaller town or part of the state, I can help you kind of figure out where the money for your part of the state is coming from. But the list on the treasurer's website is really cool and really comprehensive at this point about how much money is being allocated where. Carrie, you have a question about the data on the pilot program. Do you know if we have data?
I don't know if we have data available, but we definitely, we'll share it. I'll talk to DSHA because it's really been unveiled right now just with the public housing that have public housing units. But we will definitely get you some the data once we have some. I'll talk to Devin's involved in that, so we'll talk to Devin about that. That might be a good topic for a CoC membership meeting too, maybe to talk about the reentry pilot and how it's going.
So Sunny asked about Sussex County. Sunny, thank you for asking about Sussex County. I am really excited about Sussex County. We have Brandy on the line. I'm not going to make her talk, but Sussex County is a county that doesn't have a qualified census tract, but it's a county that has a really great housing director who I think is thinking about how to use the money for affordable housing and likely could use your support, right? As these things make their way to county council, as people are making decisions about how to use the money, it doesn't have to go to affordable housing, the county money. It could go to other things, and we want it to go to affordable housing. So absolutely, in Sussex County, I think that you should be reaching out and providing support to folks who are trying to use this money for affordable housing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. The slides will be posted on the website, and if anybody wants to get directly connected with Sarah, our contact information is also available on the website. I believe we are moving on to Deborah to talk about the Bill of Rights for individuals experiencing homelessness.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Deborah Gilbert White, founder of Her Story Ensemble. We are a membership organization of the CoC, and today I am joined by Leanne Moore, who served as a legislative aide on earlier versions of the bill, and Kyra Hoffner, who is the individual who revived the current quest for legislation supporting people experiencing homelessness in Delaware. You will hear from both of them. It is important to know that the ask for a Bill of Rights came from and was first presented in Delaware by individuals with lived experience. Coming out of sheltered homelessness in 2012, I asked the then Homeless Planning Council if a homeless Bill of Rights existed, and at that time, no. The current bill is sponsored by Representative Lynn and Senator Pinckney. The co-prime sponsors are Representative Dorsey Walker and Senator Townsend, and co-sponsors are Senator McBride, Representative Morrison, and Wilson Anton. Today we have the fourth version of this protective legislation for people identified as homeless. Over the years, we have to continue to press for legislation to support the rights of people facing housing insecurity and who are unhoused, already have, and to assist in eliminating practices and policies that criminalize or discriminate based on housing status. Advocates across the country continue to support the passage of homeless bills of rights as one strategy to challenge the intentional and unintentional ways that the humanity and dignity of people experiencing homelessness are undermined. To date, a few cities and states have passed such legislation, including Illinois, Connecticut, Duluth, Minnesota, Baltimore, Maryland, Madison, Wisconsin, and Rhode Island was the first state to pass this legislation, with Puerto Rico the first US territory to do the same. Hawaii passed the Bill of Rights in 2014, but the thing about that is that it won't be enacted until 2050. And that's one of the reasons why we continue to push for the Homeless Bill of Rights, or the Bill of Rights for people experiencing homelessness in Delaware, to be something that will be enacted once it is passed. We do not want a fluff bill. We want a bill with teeth in it. So the work towards a Bill of Rights for individuals experiencing homelessness has helped to expand the narrative about homelessness, who is homeless and why. This is an anti-discrimination legislation that protects individuals identified as homeless or housing insecure when seeking employment, housing, and services, and ensures that who are identified as homeless have the same rights and privileges as other inhabitants of the state. It eliminates the criminalization of homelessness by continuing to protect people when they have to do things unhoused that they get fined or penalized for, such as eating in public or sitting in public or being deemed as loitering. And so the bill helps to also address the criminalization of homelessness. This is a bill that makes Delaware look and sound good on paper. We don't want that to happen. That's why we're not looking for a fluff bill. And to avoid that, we have included in the bill a component, a reporting component. We needed a bill that had teeth to it. And so House Bill 235 does have teeth to it. Through the Homes campaign, opportunities for community awareness and education will help to clarify more what the bill is and what the bill is not. Part of the work will be to stop the narratives that serve to pit people experiencing homelessness or who are unhoused against others, sectors of society. One thing for sure, when passed, the Bill of Rights for individuals experiencing homelessness will be the first in the U.S. to have a reporting component and provide compensation for those who have been determined to have been harmed. This function will be provided by the State Human Relations Commission. In summary, the bill ensures that all individuals, regardless of housing status, have equal opportunity to live in decent, safe, sanitary, and healthful accommodations and enjoy equality of opportunities. If you have not already done so, you can access the legislation at the Delaware General Assembly's website, and I'll put that in the chat. Or also you can go to Her Story Ensemble's website. I'll put that in the chat as well, and you'll get a link there to read the full bill. I'll now turn it over to Leanne.
Thanks, Deborah. Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne. I previously worked at the House of Representatives, where I met Deborah when we were working on the second iteration, when I was an aide for Representative Stephanie T. Bolden, who was the previous prime sponsor. The bill, like Deborah said, has evolved to try and answer some of the questions that lobbyists were having, specifically around housing, about not being able to discriminate based on housing status, meaning if they don't have a current landlord, just saying no, even though someone might have first and last month's rent. So the landlords were the biggest hurdle in that year. So that was 2014, 15 years. Currently, the biggest hurdle is figuring out this reporting mechanism with the Human Relations Commission. Because there is nothing like this that currently exists, it is hard to find best practices because there really aren't any. So there's some concerns around, would it just make more sense to put housing as housing status as a protected class? And that's something that has been discussed by legislators, by lobbyists, by the commission many, many times. There are pros and cons to both, but what we ultimately decided is that in order to draw more specific attention to all the different facets of housing status and all the areas of your life that it affects, this bill, which specifically names everything, specifically talks to potential perpetrators who intentionally or unintentionally are discriminating. It really highlights the fact that housing and representation in housing is extremely important. Like Deborah mentioned, the biggest struggle we have politically within the Senate and the House is getting legislators educated on what homelessness actually looks like. Most folks that we talk to are envisioning someone asking for help, outside of a restaurant or sleeping on a park bench. And while that does happen, and those folks shouldn't be discriminated against either, there is also, we all know, so many more unseen, unhoused folks. And this bill is really trying to highlight those. So as we embark into the second year of this General Assembly, it's really important that we have advocates talking with their legislators to really highlight why this is so important, instead of just focusing on the perception of what it could do. And I'll pass it off to Kira.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Kira Hoffner. I did not realize I was breathing life into this bill when I carried it around for a couple of months trying to find a legislator to take it on. I recently ran for office, and one of the things that happens when you run for office is you really have to nail down what your interest and what positions you really want to take and make it your priority. And there was so many issues I was working on, but the homelessness and poverty becoming a crime in the state of Delaware was extremely important to me. And it's kind of become my life. I'm so excited to be on this call because hearing from Erin and Rachel and Devon, even Sarah, they are all breathing life into what I want to do and see what the future is for Delaware. It costs the state so much more money to keep people homeless. And this Bill of Rights is a step in the right direction into creating other bills to make families and individuals self-sufficient. I am a little disappointed to hear only 120 vouchers for the state of Delaware for people experiencing homelessness when, again, Erin brought it up earlier, 35% increase in homelessness in our state just in this year alone. There's so many people we're not seeing out there. One of the steps I took instead of, I'm a huge advocate and outreach is one of my favorite things. So instead of just running around to organizations asking them what they wanted, I ran around finding all the homeless people that are experiencing things that we don't even know about because they don't feel like they could come and tell anyone what they're experiencing. No one's really listening because even if they're not experiencing homelessness right now, but they're on the verge of it, nobody's really listening. So having a group like this is amazing because we're the first state and we're a small state and we can really make this work by all working together. So please use me as your advocate and your outreach person to get things going that are important to us. I just really want to ensure that everyone in our state, whether they're homeless, not homeless, on the verge, have every experience to enjoy what the state has to offer and get the help that they need. Again, leaving people that are on the social supplement insurance, they're not even getting enough in their month to make a rent payment. So if one family is on it, are we asking them to live in an apartment, a one-bedroom apartment with several families? That's just not healthy for everyone. So I would love to pull all our resources together, ask everyone on this call, because we all live all over the state, to contact your legislator and ask them to co-sponsor this bill. So when we get into January, we can get this bill passed, and then we could start working on other bills that can supplement this. This would be a wonderful bill if it was a package deal where we have transportation for everyone. The other thing that I keep hearing about is Wilmington, Dover, and further down south, that everyone's concentrating on those areas. Everyone knows about the bigger cities, but we have a situation that's happening all over the state around the MOT area, a little bit below the Middletown, towns in Smyrna that never get recognized, but we have an extremely large population of homelessness. The other thing is right now, our federal government is concentrating on the whole COVID aspect of what's happening to homes. And we're getting all this money, but it's only getting allocated to people that were affected by COVID. Well, we started this before COVID has come into our state or our nation. So when we started this, we were fighting for the people that were not even affected by COVID, and now we have COVID on top of that, and that's why our numbers are jumping up so fast. So I want to thank everyone on this call for what you're doing and helping people that are just need a little bit extra help. And just, as an advocate, remember, as a society, we are judged by how we treat our weakest members. And I really hope that we can get this done this year, in this session, so we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira and Deborah and Leanne. So excited that this is happening. And folks, please do not hesitate to reach out. Deborah did put some links to the Herster Ensemble website and the legislation in the chat. Please check it out. And I'm sure Deborah, Leanne, and Kira would welcome you reaching out to them to get involved in helping with the effort. Thank you. Deborah, did you have anything you wanted to add or say or close before we move on to, I believe it's breakout sessions next?
Yeah, all I wanted to say, I just put in the chat, I wanted to thank everyone and particularly all those who have been working in community along with us to get the bill to where it is now. I want to thank the Homes Campaign, who have been our community connection to help to educate and support folks who are experiencing homelessness and who are unhoused. And then also those who are part of the Advocacy and Policy Committee of the CoC and other members of the CoC, because this directly impacts the work that you do. And so to be able to protect those folks and others who are experiencing homelessness is part of the whole equation. So thank you. Support HB 235.
Thank you, Deborah. Felicia, do you want to tell folks about the breakout sessions and what's going to happen next?
Yes, so we are now at our breakout rooms segment of the meeting. So in just a moment, you'll have the option to select the breakout room of your choice. We have 3 breakout sessions that are going to happen. We have the 2021 legislative highlights. That'll be hosted by Sarah Ryan, our Housing Alliance Delaware's policy director. We also have the CoC committee information session, which will be hosted by the CoC committee chairs. And then we have a CMIS update, and that will be hosted by Amelia Ramsaran, our data training manager for Housing Alliance Delaware.
All right. So I'm here to do the legislative overview. I'm assuming most of you know this, but I'm going to do my 30-second what is our legislative process overview, and also complain for a minute. So for those of us who aren't used to our Delaware legislative sessions, we're a part-time legislature, which means we only see action between January and June. We are also a bifurcated legislative session, so that means that it's a 2-year session. And right now we are smack dab in the eye of the hurricane, right? So we've made it through the first half of our session. We still have a lot left to do. We have a whole second half of our session to go from January to June 2022. Any policy, including housing policy, has to be introduced, voted on, and passed by members of General Assembly during session. So right now, nothing is passing. Nothing is moving forward. That said, the session will come back in September for a special session to do redistricting. There was some scuttlebutt at some point during session that they might consider some legislation at that time because they'll actually be in session. But I don't think that's true. I think that they're just going to come in and fight the redistricting fight, which is, just as an aside, going to be very interesting, specifically for Sussex County, who is like where we're likely to see 2 or 3 new seats. And so that'll be an interesting fight to watch. A note on the budget, this is where I get to complain. We had a lot of money this year. We still have a lot of money. I'm not talking about ARPA funds. I'm not talking about federal funds. I'm talking about state funds. We had a lot of state funds. We did not see a huge increase in housing funding. DSHA's budget remained pretty much stagnant. They saw little mini baby increases or back to pre-COVID funding levels. We saw a community development investment grant where there's some money going to some great organizations as a one-time thing, but we did not see a lot of housing money, and that's a problem. Okay, I'll stop complaining. I'm going to take my screen down so that we can talk about Senate Bill 90, Senate Bill 101, and we already really talked about homeless Bill of Rights, but I know you folks are still here, and I really want to talk about that too. So I'm going to move on, but just to note that these are bills that are tabled, right? So when we're in the eye of the hurricane, we put down our bills, we walk away, then we come back. These are things that didn't pass, but they also didn't fail. So these are things that we need to focus on for next legislative session. I want to highlight 2 big successes because it's exciting to talk about successes. One is I'm really proud of the amendments that were made to House Bill 159. So House Bill 159 was a a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was a bill. So during the pandemic, the sheriff's offices, in order to conduct sheriff sales, had an emergency order go into place so that they didn't have to hold sheriff sales where they normally did. They could hold them outside, they could hold them different places. They wanted to codify that emergency order. So they wanted to be able to hold sheriff sales wherever for the future. And that included online sheriff sales. That made me jump up and down and pull my hair, because other places that have instituted online sheriff sales, that's allowed a lot of national and international outside investment in communities. And what I mean by that is that hedge funds and big purchasers come in and buy a lot of housing and don't do great things with it. And so I thought we needed to think through kind of, if we're going to do online sales, how we can make sure that it's not just a disenfranchisement of communities. And so that was language that was removed from this bill. That's huge. I think that's a big success for this legislative session. The criminalization of panhandling bill that was introduced this session would have changed the statute for the panhandling to be made, instead of a criminal penalty, a civil fine. We think the entire statute is unconstitutional. There should not be a ban on panhandling, period. So that bill was stricken, and we're hopeful that Representative Morrison will introduce a bill next session to get rid of that language altogether. But at least we didn't see any bad things in that way. Couple bills that passed that are exciting. Now you can deduct more money from your rent for repairs. This one, the House Bill 233, is something that I put in testimony on because I thought it was important, especially for homeless service providers. Now when your motor vehicle is towed and put in a lot and you need access to your items in your car, but you cannot pay to get the car out of the lot, you can access your personal property in the car. That is huge, particularly for families and individuals who are living out of their vehicles. They keep their papers, they keep their medication, they keep lots of important things in their cars, and they may not have the ability to pay to get the car out of the impound lot immediately, but they should have the ability to access things. So that's cool. We also, of course, don't want to forget about minimum wage. There was some good anti-discrimination legislation. We created an opioid settlement fund. We did all sorts of good stuff this session, but in my opinion, not enough for housing. So I really don't want to keep my PowerPoint up because there are not a lot of people in this room. We do have experts in the room though. So I'm going to start with Senate Bill 101. John, if you're still there, I would love to hear an update on kind of what you think the status of Right to Counsel is. And if you want to give a 30-second overview, since I didn't do that, of what Right to Counsel does.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I'd be happy to talk about 101. 101 is not dead. It is sleeping, but it will be woken up very soon. Senate Bill 101 was a combination of providing lawyers to tenants in eviction cases. That's right to counsel. That was sort of one big aspect of it. And then there was a second set of reforms that we also included, substantive reforms to Delaware Landlord Tenant Code, which I'm not going to go over all of those. The biggest of which was a pre-filing diversion program, so that you would try to divert as many cases before the eviction action was filed. It sailed through the Senate. Our champion was Senator Townsend, and he was very enthusiastic and put a lot of effort into it. It got through the Senate 13-7 with one not voting. It moved over to the House, and despite the fact that we had a lot of negotiations with a varying cast of characters on the landlord side, we made many changes to the bill, significant, important changes, but for various reasons, and I'm going to be very unlikely for me, but cautious about how I phrase it. It did not make it out of the House committee to which it was assigned. In that committee, there were 6 Democrats. The vote was 5-5, with one Democrat voting not to allow it to go through, which we were somewhat disappointed in, I think is one way of putting it. However, we, at the beginning of this, knew that this was going to be difficult. I can tell you without any question, it will be back, and it will be back in January, and we will redouble our efforts. And as we speak, our allies, we are not plotting, because that makes it sound just a little bit more than it is, but we are planning various strategies to try to kick it loose. I will say it has been a very broad coalition of folks, from advocates, legislatures, church folks, people who have lived experience with homelessness, tenants' rights organizations, the Domestic Violence Coalition, the Attorney General's office. We have a large amount of support for this. Obviously, the landlord lobby is opposed to it, and I'll say one more. And why are they opposed to it? Don't listen to all the nonsense. They're opposed to it because they want to be able to evict people without opposition when they think that's what they need to do. And they understand all too well that if tenants have attorneys or representation, landlords will not be able to evict them as easily. And that's what this is really about. It's providing protection to tenants to reduce the number of evictions. And that's where we are with Senate Bill 101. I think we are, we're not deflated, and we will be redoubling our efforts, and we will be making another run at it. We're going to be doing lots of things in between now and January, but it's going to be back in January.
So John, because I like to ask you questions in public. So all of the meetings that I've been to lately, and everyone on this meeting can probably echo this, one of the big concerns is access to housing. And so two questions have come up a lot. One is there going to still be any pre-filing diversion? And number two is, if a landlord doesn't apply for DHAP or is refusing to apply for DHAP, can they still file a failure to pay rent? I'd love to hear your official answers to those questions, because I think those are really important as we kind of continue to think about our advocacy.
Two great questions. One, there hasn't been pre-filing diversion. The current diversion that JP Court is doing is post-filing. The statute proposed pre-filing, and we would love to have that. My understanding is that while the court has lifted the requirement of post-filing diversion, there's still going to be voluntary diversion. So the court still is going to want to try to get landlords to work with tenants to get the money. Is there a requirement that landlords go through DHAP? No, there never has been. It sort of played out a little bit differently during the pandemic emergency, because in addition to the requirement of the tenant being behind in the rent, there was a requirement that the eviction be in the interests of justice. And the short version is the court wasn't going to evict someone where the landlord had said, I don't want your money even if it's available. That has now lifted, and yes, I don't think that will affect most cases. Where the landlords don't want the money is where the money issue is a subterfuge. Yes, the tenant is behind, but they're using it as an excuse just to get the tenant out. I actually don't. Yes, it's going to be cases. I don't think it's the majority of the cases. In most of the cases, the landlords want the money, and particularly. And so the irony is, particularly if it's been a while, $10,000 is a lot of money to give up. So I think. And I also believe, and we had a case involving this recently, I think the court, even though they don't necessarily have legal authority, will be pressuring landlords to take the money if it's available. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on landlords to take money. But the short answer is, no, there is no more mandatory diversion pre or post filing, although there's going to be a voluntary post filing diversion. And two, do landlords have to take the money? No, the answer is they do not. Those are both gloomy answers, but they were but at least they were answers.
No, great answers. The right answers. Thanks. Yeah, Kira.
John, what kind of pushback are you seeing with the fiscal note? And who is pushing back on you?
The fiscal note's not the issue.
So you don't have like the Republicans pushing back saying, oh,
Of course we have the Republicans pushing back. But let's look at the Senate. Every Republican voted against it, but in terms of getting it passed, who cares? We don't care. I mean, purely in terms of political muscle, it's not the Republicans that are relevant, right? It's making sure the Democrats vote for it.
Well, and also there was an allocation for this particular legislation of 2.1 million, correct, John? And that,
yes,
that remains true for the second half of the bifurcated session, so that it's already gone through the budgetary process and there's already been an allocation for it.
The fiscal note is not the issue. The issue is, landlord. I will be very blunt about this. I will say it nicely, but I will be very blunt about this. Landlords do not want tenants to have representation in court. Why? Because today they get away with illegally evicting people in the sense that they violate the rules all the time, and if the tenants don't have lawyers, they get away with it. If the tenants have representation in court, the landlords will not be able to evict them when they don't comply with the rules. That's the short version. Everybody knows what happens when tenants get representation. They get better results. Again, does that mean we're saying every tenant should stay, even if they are quote bad tenants and don't pay their rent without legal justification? Of course not. There will be tenants who have to move, but there will be lots of tenants who get to stay, or the move itself will be negotiated in a way that is more appropriate, or the lawyers can help the tenants get access to the money. The opposition to this comes from the landlords, and then more landlords.
All right, John, I'm going to cut you off. We have 2 minutes.
Good.
I gave short shrift to Senate Bill 90 and the Homeless Bill of Rights. I'd love to plant the seed of, I have to have more conversations about what legislation or what budgetary provisions we want to see in the second half of this legislative session. I don't think we should limit ourselves to the 3 bills that were tabled, though those are super important. I think that as we move forward, we need to be thinking creatively, strategically about what we're going to do with this next session. So does anyone else have any comments, questions, things that they want to say in the last minute we have? Yeah, Marianne.
I also wanted to add that it's a great time to be thinking about this $1 billion in the surplus, as you mentioned, and the relief dollars that are coming in. And so I think there still isn't clear direction on where that money is going, how that money is going to be spent. I ran into Claire DeMatteis this morning. So like, we really need to be thinking creatively, not just through the legislative processes, et cetera, but how to access that money in other ways, either through the counties or however that money is going to be dispersed, and advocating that it go to these various issues.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to thank you for the overview of these bills, and starting with the explaining how the legislative process works in Delaware. That was actually really helpful for me. And thank you to you guys for working on this part of things. It feels much more positive to be on the side of, okay, how do we make these things work and how things are there. I don't think my blood pressure could take the confronting, changing the systemic side. So thank you so much for all that.
Well, thanks, Matt. That's really nice. Sunny.
Question, Sarah. I'm a local landlord in Georgetown, Delaware, and I've been trying for probably past decade to figure it out how to create more affordable housing in the county. I get a pushback from the city, the county, and everybody. There's not much help available if I want to build small houses or houses which people can use for $500, $600, $700 a month, and they can live with all inclusive.
So, Sunny, I'm gonna interrupt you very rudely because we only have like 30 seconds left and we're gonna be kicked off. I'll connect with you offline, but this is a huge issue. Thank you for bringing it up. Absolutely, we need to be providing more resources for affordable housing and the folks who are providing that housing like you. Absolutely. Let's support you. That's really important. But I didn't want us to just disappear.
Right. And
Or
with
it's
a
gonna
$1 billion
hang up on us.
surplus, yeah, with a $1 billion surplus, let's get it done.
Let's get it done, guys. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you. You're good.
Working in our housing and fair housing units. And my co-chair, as y'all just heard from her, Deborah Gilbert-White. It's been, a lot of fun working with Deborah over. I've been a co-chair for about a year now, I think. Excited to kind of talk about some of the work that the committee is doing. I think, as you can kind of see here, we have the list of bills, and I know there was a lot of in-depth kind of policy talk that was going on earlier, and what I think of particularly with things that were coming up related to vouchers, the source of income bill is something that we specifically met with a few legislators about, and in conjunction with some of our other committees, particularly the Racial Justice and Equity Committee. And so I think just as a committee, our kind of goal is, keeping, tabs on what legislation is, coming out and is, and doing and making sure that our organizations are working together and kind of coordinating to, communicate our support for various bills, and really just making sure that we're showing up at a variety of, whether it's hearings or whether it's hearings at the state Senate or state House, or in whether it's City of Wilmington City Council meetings or other City Council meetings, and just making sure that we know when these things are happening, and making sure that the CoC has a voice there. So I think obviously probably people in this group are familiar with some of the more we heard all the exciting stuff. I'll put some of the disappointing stuff that I think in a sense it was disappointing that we didn't see any action on it this session in terms of right to counsel or source of income. But you heard from everyone what is still what we're still working on, and how those huge policy ideas aren't dead. And it's on us, and the organizations that we work with to, make sure that they're back, when, next session and back on the table. And, after kind of some disappointment this time around, I think we've, learned lessons to, hopefully get those, at least on my end, right to counsel is such a huge, it would be a game changer. And I think now that we've kind of, can learn lessons from that and move forward from there. So like Felicia said, please feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in joining. We're still working on setting the date for our next meeting, but it's going to be in September at some point. And definitely look forward to hearing any new members and welcome anybody on board.
Thanks so much, Tony. Did anyone have any questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you, Tony, for sharing. And yes, as Tony said, we need as many people to be advocacy folks, working through the CoC. We are often asked to speak at different places and to write comments and provide public comment, and for it to come from people who are doing the work or who have had the experience, is helpful. So yes, thank you for considering becoming part of our committee.
Thank you so much, Tony and Deborah. Did anyone have any questions for our advocacy and policy chairs? Okay.
Yeah, curious about something. And Felicia, it's Mimi Rail. I'm not quite sure where to put this, but we were just talking about all the funding that could potentially go for affordable housing development or affordable housing preservation in the general session. And again, I don't know which of the committees to address this to, but I wanted to lay it out there. It seems like there is such power in coming together in some sort of integrated way to start to lobby for affordable housing development or preservation at the local level, and not just the statewide level, not just the day with the legislators, but really what we were talking about 15 minutes ago, about how do you start to affect change, you hope, at the local level in terms of funding decisions. And again, I don't know whether that's here or the systems approach, or I'm not sure, but I wanted to lay it out there and see if that is some of the conversation in the advocacy committee about mounting something like that.
I think that that's extremely important. I think it's something that, you know, we would definitely, you know, I think is definitely important to think about, you know, especially a lot of the stuff coming up, you know, is at the state or, you know, larger city level. I think when we look at things locally, you know, I spent my first 2 years with Classy in Sussex County, and I know that, you know, I know how much of an affordable crisis or affordable housing crisis there is down there. And, you know, I've seeing it, I've been seeing the clients down there, you know, it's unfair that it, you know, almost gets forgotten, you know, sometimes because of how, you know, rural the county is. So I think, you know, we're obviously a committee that wants to look, you know, be advocates everywhere across in Delaware, and particularly at the local level in Sussex County, it's really important. So I you know, obviously I think that's something that we would, you know, love to talk about and have come up in our meetings.
Fantastic. Thanks. I don't want to hijack things. Thank you for that.
All right, perfect. Moving on. Racial justice and equity. We have Paula Witcher with us. Hey, Paula, I think you're on mute.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry about that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to be quick because my internet is unstable.
No
so if I go out, then it's not me. I ain't hang up on it. It's just my internet keeps going in and out. But basically, the goal of racial justice and equity is that we are a committee that helps develop, we are not that. We're the committee that analyzes the negative impact of homelessness on people and communities of color, identify racial disparities in homelessness, and proposes actions to step forward in moving toward a more equitable future in Delaware. The sole purpose of this committee is to focus on the affordability of housing and also the quality of housing here in the, not just here in the state of Delaware, but throughout the country. People of color seem to have a difficult time in finding affordable housing and quality housing. You know, they're judged based on, you know, because of the color of their skin. And those are concerns that this committee wants to address. You know, you can have two people with the same income, same credit score, apply for the same unit, but oftentimes it's those that are Black and brown who are overlooked because of the color of their skin. So we're advocating for this particular community to fight for them, to make sure that everybody has equal rights. Any questions? I'm sorry, I had to be real quick. I just had to make sure I got it all in before it went out.
No problem, Paula. Yeah, we have about just about 10 more minutes in this meeting, so that's not a problem. Did anyone have any questions for Paula?
We do meet once a month. Our next meet, I'm sorry, we do meet once a month. Our next meeting coming up will be August 26th, and we meet from 2 to 3 by way of Zoom. And when we come back, we will be definitely focused on the affordability and the quality of housing.
I have a question. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Valerie Bradshaw. So when you talk about looking to address the affordable housing and the discrimination of the affordable housing, are you working towards putting policy in place, or are you connecting people who are experiencing that to some type of organization that helps them? I just want to be clear about what you do.
As in regards to policy, we will be working closely with our advocacy and policy committee to address these issues.
All right, thank you.
And hopefully that we can, get this onto the floor and over.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Paula. For purposes of time, we're going to go ahead and keep it going. So next we have membership and nominations chaired by Brandy Nauman.
Hi, everyone. Brandy Nauman. I am with Sussex County Government in the Community Development and Housing Department. And we have recently kind of ramped up our membership committee membership. So that's exciting. So we have a few folks on there now, not just me. Thanks to all those guys. Tyler is here, Devin. Who am I missing? Felicia, of course. Thanks, guys, for being on here. So we have finally gotten together and just kind of talked about how to give the CoC some more presence and get folks involved and stay involved, and just really identifying what membership means, what voting membership means, and kind of working on some marketing ideas as well, which is pretty exciting, and just giving us a better presence on the website, but also to allow membership to have some sort of like social media nuggets to kind of take away, and statistics that they can use to share and connect back to that CoC membership. And also really kind of working with HAD to identify how our membership aligns with HUD's requirements for the CoC, and just really sort of categorizing who our members are, what they represent, and where our gaps are. Because while we are a large membership, which is amazing, we still do have some missing pieces, which we will be, that's kind of our mission as a committee to fill those gaps and reach out there. And our next meeting is August 24th at 1. So we welcome anyone to join us. Please reach out to myself or Felicia to get added to that group. Hopefully I covered everything. Tyler, Felicia, let me know if there's anything I'm missing.
That was great, Brandy. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for Brandy?
Sorry, one, is the membership engagement plan available? I'd love to take a look at that.
Sure. Yes, I think it's still in draft form, I want to say, but it is definitely sort of an active work in progress. So as a member of the membership committee, you are more than welcome to comment and add that. So yes, we can get that to you.
Hey, as of so far, non-participating members. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you.
All right, moving on to Service Solutions.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ruth Ann Messick. I am the co-chair of the Service Solutions with Joe Allegra Smith, who is our chairperson. And this committee identifies gaps in services or service connections and develops strategies for enhancing or expanding access to these services for persons experiencing homelessness in Delaware. We had a real robust meeting at our last meeting. We're looking forward to our next one, which is August 3rd from 10 to 11. So if you're interested, please either let Joe or myself know. We are working on developing some kind of centralized format for barrier service, like reducing barriers that people face, not just the homelessness, but anybody who is homeless, all of the other barriers that go along with it. We know that if they're homeless, they're also probably facing multiple other barriers as well. So we want to kind of come up with that solution where it can kind of like, where can I go to be directed to wherever I need to be, whether it's to quit smoking, I need food, I need help with rent. So we're working really hard on that, and that will be the focus of our upcoming meeting in August, and hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth Ann. Does anyone have any questions for Ruth Ann? So we're going to move on to our final committee, which would be system performance. With Kim Brockenbach.
Hi, this is Kim. I am the chairperson of the System Performance Committee. We've been working to identify and analyze gaps, evaluate performance, recommend solutions for improvement of the CoC homeless service system. That means a lot of times we're really digging into a lot of the reports that are created by the Housing Alliance Delaware for the CoC. And we're really looking at, in detail, at the system performance metrics that HUD has for CMIS, and looking at how we can improve system performance, look at the H report is rapid rehousing report. The PIT HIC report is the point in time housing inventory chart report. That's a report most folks will know what the PIT, the PIT point in time study is. Others may not know that our housing inventory chart is a chart that's created each year of all of the shelter, permanent housing, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, those kinds of things that are a part of our continuum of care. We also look at the
Hey, Kim, just to,
yep.
we have about 60 seconds left.
Okay, the other reports, we don't have our next meeting scheduled yet. We're working on a survey, and as soon as the survey is ready, we're going to get together and look at that. So we'd love to have anybody who wants to join the committee and help us with the work that we're doing. Just if you love looking at data, that's a great way to get involved. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kim. And we're also looking for a co-chair for this committee.
Thank you.
So if you are interested in co-chairing this committee or know of anyone who may be interested, please let us know. We have about 15 seconds before our breakout session closes. Thank you everyone for joining this session today. Thank you to all of our chairs and co-chairs for presenting, and you guys have a great day.
All right. So thank you for joining this CMIS breakout session. Most of you I've spoken to. I think one person I've not, just can't see on camera though. I'm Amelia Ramseren. I'm the data training manager with Housing Alliance Delaware. I was just asked to do a breakout session to provide some updates, kind of review some CMIS specific things. We can definitely talk about anything related to CMIS and data if you would like. I'm pretty open to that. So here's my contact information. I have my email address here. At the end, I also have my phone number, so you are also, you have access to that. Let's change the slide if I can actually change it. Okay, here we go. So here's our agenda for the next 20 to 30 minutes. I just wanted to review some CMIS related things as far as data entry as it is right now in the system. So I do have a quick reminder about centralized intakes process and how that changed over the past year, as well as a little reminder about releases of information. Then I do have some announcements / updates to provide relating to CMIS. So as you see, we'll talk very briefly about CMIS staff additions. We are in the process of the CMIS license renewal process, so we'll be talking a little bit about that. The huge update that I wanted to provide is about a transition happening within CMIS. So we are, oh, I put the wrong thing. We are moving from the shelter point module to a new unit manager module. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I have a few updates to provide about the 2022 HUD data standards. At the end, hopefully we'll have some time for questions or any kind of feedback that any of you may have. Sorry, I just want to make sure I see everybody's face before we move on. So since I can't see everyone's face, anyone is free to speak up if they have any questions, if they have any comments. I am, again, open for that. So the first thing I do want to talk about is the centralized intake CMIS process. Over the past year or so, since basically the COVID, everyone's been changing their process because of COVID. We've also used that time to transition to a process change within centralized intake as a response to the HUD 2020 data standards. So those of you who have been trained with a refresher training from me, if you are a CMIS end user, you've heard a lot about this, how the process has changed within centralized intake. Some of you who have not had a training recently, or you don't use CMIS directly, here's kind of a breakdown of what has been happening. Centralized intake is now The coordinated entry processes around the country are now required to put their data or their information within their HMIS system. So our centralized intake team has been putting all of their contacts with clients directly into CMIS. They were not doing that before 2021. That was only referrals back then. So now centralized intake is creating CMIS profiles for all prospective clients who contact them. So they are answering phones and creating CMIS profiles for those individuals as they come in. They are updating a current living situation sub-assessment that is available to all CMIS users to view. The current living situation is going to be over time building a history of where clients tell centralized intake that they are staying to help better guide which route should be taken as far as assistance that they could get. Outreach teams are also using this current living situation sub-assessment, but most of the work is being done by centralized intake in that data element specifically. They are also enrolling eligible clients into the coordinated entry project that you will see in CMIS with the entry exit page. So you are going to be able to view that through the entry exit page. There are two new data elements as well called the coordinated entry event and coordinated entry assessment that centralized intake is also updating when they are contacting clients. So they are going to be providing end users more in-depth information about the work that they are actually doing with clients on the phone before they are being referred to providers. So those are available for you all to view. A couple of months ago, I believe it was in May, but I may be wrong, we had changed the process for referrals within centralized intake. So in the past, we were only doing shelter referrals through CMIS. We are now sending all referrals, so shelter, transitional housing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and diversion programs through CMIS service transactions as well. So does anybody have any questions about the referral process at all? Because again, that is new, but again, this is how we are going to be tracking referrals within CMIS and not just emails moving forward.
Just a question, will we be able to receive a copy of the PowerPoint with the details on it? Okay, thank you.
I will definitely be able to do that, yep. The other huge change for centralized intake as far as their data collection while talking to clients on the phone is that they are no longer updating income, non-cash benefit, and health insurance information. So I did want to bring this to everyone's attention, especially for the end users who are entering your clients when they actually come to your organization. Usually this information was sent to you directly, so there was less for you to update, but especially for these three data elements, income, benefits, and health insurance, centralized intake is no longer updating them. So you are, as well as the rest of the assessment information sent to you, you should be checking and updating all of these data elements or all of these questions with your intake, but these three specifically are not going to be updated by centralized intake and not have been updated by them for some time.
Can I ask the question, why are they deciding to no longer input this information prior to referral?
So I think the huge thing was that it's no longer required by local reporting needs, but also at the same time talking to clients, clients can provide any information, and centralized intake has never had a way to confirm any information they put into the system. So since income, benefits, and insurance don't really influence what services clients are also offered, we just didn't see the need for centralized intake to update this, and it can also reduce income-related errors when it comes to data quality. So it is only these three questions, but again, it gets very hard to maintain, especially when centralized intake, who only talks to clients over the phone, don't have a way to confirm this information before they put it into the system.
And I'll just add, Klaisha, it's not, so for most program types, it's required by HUD that those be filled out. It's not required. So with the new HUD data standards, as Amelia said, for coordinated entry programs specifically, they took those out. Again, because it doesn't influence what referral a household would get. With all of the other new data requirements put on centralized intake, we didn't want to have staff collecting information that wasn't immediately relevant, especially if they're dealing with trying to quickly get people, shelter referrals. So it's like a lot of work for no benefit, and it's not required.
On our end, though, it still is required, correct?
Correct. Yep. So when referrals are made and folks are coming to your shelter programs or your rapid rehousing programs or your supportive housing programs, yes, absolutely. So you'll go through, you'll do your intake, and you'll still want to make sure that all the information when you're entering them into your project is up to date and correct.
I have another question, and this might be a little bit off topic, but in reference to Social Security cards, or Social Security numbers, because a lot of times that comes up as a data element that is missing because parents may not have access to the information. They lost the cards, they're transient, they don't know where their documents are. Is there a way that information, once we plug in a certain amount of information, that is accessible across the board, especially if they've been in shelter and maybe presented it at another shelter, but due to visibility, I don't know, we're not able to see it, but it can still populate?
So that is the huge thing on my next slide about releases of information.
Awesome.
And that's
Perfect.
why I wanted to provide a reminder about releases. Yep. So I did just want to bring up centralized intake's new process, because it does affect some of the ways that you collect and enter data into the system. We still have to report this data out to HUD and other funding sources. So some of these things are now on the providers to put into the system. So number one, especially if you're taking direct referrals from centralized intake, you are less likely to need to create new CMIS profiles. As long as your clients contacted centralized intake at least once in the last year, they should have a profile in the system. Walk-ins would be the one exception, or if you are not taking referrals directly from CI. Accepting, declining, and canceling referrals is another change that has happened. Again, everyone was trained on this back in May or April or May. So if you have any questions about that, you can always reach out to me again. And again, moving forward, you should be checking all of your intake information when you're entering clients into your projects, but you should always be checking income, non-cash benefits, and health insurance and updating it, because centralized intake is no longer updating it. So it is now on the providers to make sure that's up to date. Any questions about that? Any more questions? No. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to just remind everyone about is releases of information. Number one, I did post recently a reminder for releases of information to be entered for clients entered into the system. Any client that you're working with within your organization should have a release of information that is signed, because like you mentioned, there is some data that has to be shared between organizations, and not putting in releases of information stops that information from being shared over time. So I know, especially with a lot of demographic information, that kind of disappears over time as releases of information expire. But the same thing goes as any of the other assessment questions that is sent through referrals and updated in project entries. Those are shared across organizations as long as releases of information are being entered for clients in every organization that they work with. I've been seeing a decreasing number of ROIs, which is why I wanted to bring it up. So that's also a reason why many of you may not be seeing some of your clients' information in CMIS as well when they are referred to you. The other update relating to releases of information that I wanted to provide is that ROIs can now be entered into CMIS profiles for 3 years instead of 1. We are doing this because it will share information about our clients across providers for a longer period of time. And this is going to be especially helpful with centralized intake data that they are constantly updating every time a client contacts them. So we are hoping with this, there's better sharing of data. And again, you'll have more up-to-date data and complete data when working with your clients and updating their files. So At the bottom, I just put a quick reminder, making sure that everyone puts in 2 ROIs in the system for all of your clients that you work with. One is for your parent provider, the organization you work for, and then there's going to be one for at least every project the client's being entered into in the system. I'm sorry, I realize that there's a countdown for amount of time left, so I'm going to keep going. Do you have any questions, anybody, before we move on from this?
Of
Go
course
ahead,
I do.
Felicia.
So our program does a release of information from 1 year. Does that mean we need to change our information that we're sharing with the participants to say that this information is now extended for 3 years?
I would say to do so if your ROI form explicitly states that you're doing a release of information for 1 year. I know that another organization has preferred doing 1 year ROIs. So it's just as long as they keep adding a new one every year, which sometimes they don't do. So if you choose to do 1 year ROIs, that's fine. But if you are going to move into the 3 year, it does need to be explicitly stated. And like your paper shouldn't say 1 year, but then in the system, you're putting it in for 3 years. Clients should give full consent about or be fully aware of where their information is going and for how long. Some quick updates and announcements. Again, I'm sorry, I'm going to be kind of breezing through these because my timer says 3 minutes. Number one is that we have some CMIS staff additions coming. I'm not going to provide too much information on that. So knock on wood that within August, we should be having a new data administrator who is replacing Vinay Patel, who's been working with us, who's now also working on a contracted basis. Will be joining in August, as well as a data support specialist, which is a new position. They will be assisting you with training, technical assistance, and all of those types of things. So you will all, who are end users, will have the ability to work closely with them as well as me. Introductions and all of that will happen as they start working with us, but very exciting because as most of you know, it's kind of been me being at the front of CMIS work for the past couple of months. So that's a good, a nice update. We are in the process of the CMIS license renewal process. Basically what I'm letting you know with this slide is that I will be sending out agency partner agreements and user agreements on Friday to all agencies. All CMIS participating agencies will need to complete 1 agency partner agreement on behalf of the entire organization. I did put a new section to ask about who I should be contacting for data related needs as the agency administrator. And then all CMIS end users will have to complete a CMIS user agreement regardless of when they join CMIS. So even if I trained someone last month and they signed a new user agreement last month, they'll have to sign another one again. So again, this will be sent out on Friday. Next huge thing is the ShelterPoint to unit manager transition. WellSky is in the process of uplifting the ShelterPoint module and releasing a new unit manager module by the end of 2021. They're still working on some kinks, so unfortunately I don't have too much information on this, but we will be expected sometime between now and the end of the year to move out of ShelterPoint into this new module. We will be providing trainings for this before its launch. But again, we don't have all the information I hope to have for today. But I can show you kind of a brief overview of what it looks like. It's kind of told that it's going to be a more user-friendly interface. You'll be able to put beds as available, unavailable, out of service, that kind of thing. You'll be able to filter clients. All updates and service transactions will just be happening in Client Point. Instead of in ShelterPoint or Unit Manager, because again, this is going to be all about checking in clients and moving them out. Also, this is what the check-in page is kind of going to look like. You're going to have all the steps outlined on the system as well as progress for any entries that you are putting into the system for Unit Manager. So that's going to be available. This room's going to end in 1 minute, so I apologize. This is getting cut short. I do have some information about the HUD 2022 data standards on this PowerPoint as well, so I will be sending this out for you all to view. But obviously, anything I did not get to explicitly talk about, I will be sharing more information in the future as well to get us prepared for all of those changes.
So I did just.
Amelia, can you just remind folks real quick when the new data standards go into effect? We still have a couple months, right? It's not till October.
Yeah, 22nd. So we do have a couple. We do have a couple of months to work on that. New data standards go in effect in October. So WellSky does have to do some back end work before they kind of affect us anyway. But October 1st, we do have the new data standards. And again, in this PowerPoint, the main ones are outlined here. But program specific ones, I would be reaching out to people more specifically or more directly.